is the July 13th version of the Dash community call. So hi, everyone. I'll go ahead and share my screen and show what we talked about last time. And so last time we had a Q&A by Keysight to go over the build work and the improvements that Chris had put forward. And we did a documentation reminder here of the different documents we have for reading. And for today, so we've had a couple of different meetings throughout the early part of the week where we've talked about the PTF, the packet test framework, and the testing arm of what we're looking into doing. And Chris, did you have something you wanted to show today?
No, we decided to hold back on that until things settle down a little more. Thanks.
Yeah, not necessarily a demo, but could you reiterate the improvements you made over the last week and a half to the?
Oh yeah, definitely. I have a list of things, talking points. Do you want me to start with those now, or is there any more agenda?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay. Let me share a screen here. A moment. So I'll also just kind of review some of the PRs that that are of interest to me, just to get a discussion going about them. I have this pull request here, which I'll describe in a minute. I call it Docker Diet, where I worked on some of the Docker file optimizations that I'd listed in to-dos in the Dash pipeline README, and I decided, well, I'm going to tackle them myself. So I spent quite a bit of time splitting a large Docker file into several smaller ones, and the total image size is in the 2.5 to 2.7 gig range, whereas it used to be 12.5. So a lot of improvements there, and it results in cutting the CI pipeline runtime by 50%, because so much time was spent just pulling the Docker image to even start the pipeline. So that's a big improvement. And if anyone's interested in how I did that, want to get into Docker file nuances, maybe we can do a deep dive someday on that. People are curious. It's just standard techniques. This is waiting to be accepted. This right here needs to be merged, and I think we might be waiting for some more reviews of that. So it would be nice if this could get its final review and merge soon. I could merge this first, but kind of like to do things sequentially, because it causes, if you do things out of order, then you're kind of penalizing the earlier ones by having to do all the conflict resolves. So we can do that first. And then this one here, I'll show you an example of the pipeline runtime differences. First, I'm going to jump to this one. I noticed a new pull request, and the person responsible for this can talk about it if they want, but I want to show you how the pipeline works. So if you go to Actions, you can see pipeline runs, and this is the pull request right here that was just done. And if you see, the pipeline ran 7 hours ago when this pull request was opened. It automatically triggered a pipeline, and it passed. Right? It's a nice green checkbox. So that sort of shows this now in action when I'm not doing a demo or something. It's actually live, and it's working for everyone who does a pull request. And if you look at it, you can see all the things that are done. Right? It pulls the Dockers, builds all the code, and you can see first it pulls P4C and builds it, and it doesn't take very long to do. Right, you're like within 30 seconds you've compiled the P4 code. If it's even compiling or not, and so that's nice to know that you get it within 30 seconds. The pipeline knows that the code's compiles, and then it does all these other steps, and even runs this simple test that I showed before, this traffic test. So the whole thing took like 3.5 minutes. So I want to show you another action example, and that is this one. Okay, now this is, let's see, let me make sure I find the right one. Here we go. Okay, when I do the pull request for this Docker diet, I'll show you that the whole thing runs in 2 minutes now.
Mhm.
Okay, actually under 2 minutes. So it's pulling these images which are much smaller. So it's not taking 2 minutes to pull them. It's taking 18 seconds here. Then there's another one that takes let's see, where is it? That seems too fast. Maybe it was cached. But the whole thing runs much quicker now. So it's like half the runtime. And so I'll continue to try to squeeze more performance out of these images and runtimes as we go along, but I've got it pared down quite a bit. Any questions to this point? So once we submit this, it'll be better for everybody. It'll also, besides just the speed, the image size in the cloud is important, the Docker image size. Like right now we're running in the Azure free runners and they have a 14 gig disk size and a 7 gig memory size. These Docker images are 12 gig, you're really almost out of space just with your run image. So it's real important to try to break things into smaller images that are loaded on demand for each step. Like a couple of 1 or 2 gig is okay. And then you have all the rest of your runner memory and disk for doing the actual work you're interested in. So that's one reason why you want to make small Docker files. Plus just speeds everything up. And same thing goes when you pull these onto your local PC and do development. You don't want to be, you want to be able to run, let's say, in a virtual machine. A lot of people use Windows and then run VirtualBox to do their development. You don't want to have gigantic memory allocation for any of these things. You want to have VMs that are reasonable. By comparison, when you build Sonic, you need 100 meg in your machine minimum. It's really kind of a burden. So we'll try to keep our things small if we can. So that's that. And then I have another, let's see. I'm working on another pull request, which I'll submit hopefully within a few days, maybe sooner. And that's going to build the SAI Thrift Server. I've been working on that for a few weeks. And I've got right now preliminary, I've got a dev branch in my own fork, and it builds the SAI Thrift Server. Let's see. Yeah, it generates a SAI Thrift client and server. So that's basically the C++ server that's bound to libSci. And the libSci is the SAI module that Marian explained, many weeks ago. He wrote all this auto generation code that creates a libSci. Now it's getting bound to a SAI Thrift server, and that means you can run tests over an RPC channel. And let me refer back to this diagram that we've seen many times. So the part I'm working on right now is this gray shaded area. So it builds the SAI Thrift server, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And so now you have a running process that's this whole thing. It's one process. And of course, it's going to be a Docker file. And this process then talks to over a socket to this process, which is the behavioral model v2 with a P4 runtime server. And this is kind of vanilla right now, right out of p4.lang, p4lang.org, p4.org, the P4lang repository. This will be replaced with the modified BMV2 that the working group is working on in the behavioral model working group. But right now it's vanilla, and it can still perform, tests like VNet test, for example. It just doesn't have the connection tracking. So now we'll have a SAI Thrift server, and the next step is to write tests in Python that can talk and use the server. It acts as a client and talks to the server, and then configures behavioral model or the SAI tables that are done in this P4 manner. So we want to be able to write tests here. And this SAI Thrift server is compiled in the pipeline, and then it generates a Docker that runs this whole thing. So this server itself is a Docker that can talk over this channel to the behavioral model. So progress to date is I've got this server running, and I've just barely got it working last night. I can make a Thrift connection, set up a session, and I haven't written any tests yet, but the channel is open and talking. Right, so a thrift connection is made, and that's kind of like a good sign. You know, the sockets are set up, the thrift connection, all the libraries are in place. I want to also, you know, throw a nod to Intel. They did this SAI Thrift Server generation in the SAI repo, and I'm utilizing that. So that big framework, which was done and, you know, kind of like late last year and improved earlier this year, that's really responsible for being able to do this. So it was quite a huge effort, and I've been utilizing that. Found a few issues in trying to integrate with the Dash site SAI headers, but I've already got issues and PRs filed to fix those. So we should be good. And I've been synchronizing with Intel, you know, offline on this. So we're getting pretty good to go. Marianne, we had spoken last time about some fixed SAI functions that need to be added to this libSAI. Things like SAI API query, those kinds of administrative functions. I dummied them all out. I just wrote empty functions that return OK, so that everything could compile and link. So they just need to be fleshed out. And it's not clear to me how much we need those for these SAI Thrift tests. You know, you need them for a network operating system like Sonic, but for this,
well, you'll need one. I think you'll need one definitely, which is SAI API query.
Okay. Okay.
At least.
So that's a to-do for Marian, and he's aware of that, but the dummy code is there and you can just flesh it out. It's all linking and running as far as I know. So, and then this SAI Thrift client, I don't really have this in the diagram because I just came up with it in the last day or two. There's another Docker that's built that runs, it has all the code and libraries needed to run the SAI Thrift client. So that means you can have a script, and there should be a little, you know, Docker around this area. You can write scripts either in PyTest, which is the approach that I prefer, and you can also write them in PTF. So this is something Reshma or Intel people would be very interested in because they're real strong users of PTF. All this Docker for SAI Thrift client will contain all the libraries, will contain everything from the SAI repo that you need to write PTF tests. In fact, it will have all of the existing tests and framework, so you can actually just use it in place in the Dash repo. You don't have to do any you know, extra work. So I'll as I get this working, I'll detail all that out in the READMEs and do some kind of a walkthrough with the team here. Any questions?
Hey, Chris, this is great work. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. This is a lot of work. One quick question on, I believe the next step would be integration with Snappy for traffic testing.
Yes, we need to start writing some actual tests. And we will be doing that, you know, in the near future, as soon as this framework's working.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, and you know, we'll be. What I'm hoping will happen in the near future is, Marianne, you were going to write like 1 or 2 exemplary VNet tests, I believe.
Yeah, related to VNet routing.
Yeah, and we can talk about how you want to go about that, but you could either just write another C++ program, you know, and send some packets with Scapy if you want, or just sketch out what you want to do. But we can make that one of our first real tests.
Mm-hmm.
We'll figure out a way to use our traffic generator to generate those packets. And then we'll have like a working example that people can look at and understand. And Keysight will be putting quite a bit of work into this area in the coming weeks and months. So we'll have a growing body of tests. And then what we hope is we can create some nice use cases and design patterns that, you know, developer can come in and go, oh, I'm adding a new feature. I want to test a feature. I see how it's done. Just copy and paste and change the details. That's the desired MO, right? When we're doing these kind of things, we want it to be mechanical and easy.
Yeah.
And one more ask is we start coming up with a JSON schema format to be able to represent configurations in an agnostic way, because we want to eventually generate the SAI Thrift tests and eventually SAI Redis tests and even GNMI tests from those schema. And it's kind of a big job to come up with a complete schema for the whole Dash config. So what I recommend we do is incrementally, if we get a VNet test working, let's say a simple test case, let's figure out the JSON schema for that test so we don't try to boil the ocean. And that's a good starting point. And let's just try out the process.
So Chris, this may have been my bad. I already submitted one in the PR for the one IP test. JSON based on the dash from, I think, Sunny or somebody provided a sample.
Okay.
It's already in the PR.
Okay. We should talk about that PR for a second in a moment. Maybe I'll let you talk about your PR. It's been baking for 4 months and it's time to come out of the oven, I think. So I just wanted to give people the broad strokes of what I'm working on. And also in these upcoming PRs, I've taken the documentation and hopefully made it a lot better. It was one gigantic README before. I've tried to break it into more digestible pieces because it was a little bit too much.
Chris, if you don't mind, I just want to say 1 or 2 sentences about the SAI Thrift.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. We recently have done a detailed design review of the changes in the SAI Thrift, SAI PTF test framework with the small group here. And we will be doing that in the broader group as well. At the moment, basically, we have made all the changes in the automated framework, test framework, to adapt it to the Dash devices with fewer ports, and also actually adapted a lot of test cases that are existing to work with the Dash scenario. So currently we are trying to test it with, use it with the real hardware, and we want to make sure that we, run these tests with the virtual simulation environment that we have, so that it's all backward compatible, so that the eventual framework and the test cases will be able to run on all the different devices, switch and Dash devices as well. So at that point, we can do a review in the community, in broad community here. Before upstreaming, we would like to make this PTF framework itself available to at least Keysight and Microsoft, because we are working together on that. But if anyone wants access to that, we will be able to provide that access as well before we actually upstream it to SAI. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we could collaborate on the VNet test case together, because we are also working on that at this moment. So with yourself and Marianne.
Yeah, there's a lot of people are lining up all together right now to start doing these tests. It's nice that it's all coming together at the same time. Having working with this SAI Thrift Server, other than a few tiny, adjustments that came up when I started doing the Dash use case, it really worked well. And just to reiterate, I'm using SAI as a Git submodule, so it's actually like, think of it like a symbolic link to another repo, and it's controlled by versioning, so you always know what you're getting. It's not just latest, it's a specific commit, and we can update that at any time to track, the evolution of SAI repo. This entire repo and the test cases are also going to be available in the SAI Thrift client Docker that I'm creating, which means you basically have the entire PTF test repo built into the Docker image. So you don't have to copy or bring anything in, it's just there. And so the implication, Reshma, and we'll work together on, getting the workflows and how to do that. It's all right there for you. You don't have to do any adjustments. The whole set of test cases there, you just have to invoke the ones you want. So, but I probably won't be able to put much time into trying out the PTF test cases myself. So that's where collaborating with other people like Intel will be really helpful. And then, we can work together to iron out all the workflow wrinkles, because there'll be discoveries. I also want to thank people who've tried out the Dash repo workflows, the make system and all that. People have been giving me some feedback either directly or offline. There's still few glitches like file permissions and things. Unfortunately, the Docker files that I uploaded they have like Chris as a username inside the images, and then people have to do a change permission or change own in their own workspace. So that's something you find out when some other victim tries your code. You go, oh, assumptions. It worked for me, and it works in the pipeline because root runs everything. But as soon as another user tries it to run it, you find these things. So I'll be working out those wrinkles. And please, if you have to hack something to make this work, let me know. Don't just move on because I won't know. So, Bud's given me some feedback recently on that ownership issue. So I'll solve all that. As soon as I solve the big problems, I'll go back and polish all these problems up, and then just keep giving me feedback. So I want this to be push button automatic, no surprises, no gotchas. That's the goal. And there's always things you learn when someone else tries it. So that's kind of my presentation. I just can Prince, is Prince on the call?
He'll be on at 9:30. He had to
okay.
attend a 9 to 9:30, but he'll be on right after that. And we always have Gohan, so Gohan's here too. If you have a question. Do you have a Sonic question?
No, it's more about the JSON schema. I keep hounding
Yeah.
Prince for that, and I'll just ask him again.
Okay.
But
After 9:30.
I realize we could make the ask a lot smaller by saying let's just use as much as we need to start with, and also Mercha can talk about what he's done.
Yeah.
See how
Go
that
ahead, Mitchell.
meshes. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Chris?
Hey,
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, Chris, just before we move on, while we are on this topic. So where does the GitHub action stop today?
Sorry, what was the question?
Where does the GitHub actions stop today? Because I believe, eventually we all have to roll this all testing into the GitHub actions as soon as some PR is submitted. So today, I believe we are not doing all this, since all this framework is not ready, the tests are not ready. Where do we stop? Is it just only compiling of P4 code and ensuring, okay, it compiles, and then we stop and we declare that we are done?
No.
In the
Let me review that. We're actually doing a lot more than that. And I'll just review from, let's see, previous, but let's just look, for example, at the most recent pull request and look at the actions. Okay, so this was submitted. So it compiles the P4 code. It generates the SAI API with the auto generation framework. It spins up a couple of VETHs. It launches the BMV2 switch. It does a couple simple SAI table accesses, which actually go to the switch and use P4 runtime, and it actually sends packets through the switch. So it's installing Snappy and XCSC traffic generator, and it's sending 1,000 packets or through the switch and verifying that they come back. There's extra packets that come in because Linux insists on donating extra lovely, control plane packets into the VETHs that we don't want, but we ignore them. So it's actually sending packets through the switch. So it's actually doing a real traffic test. And what we're going to do is start doing configuration of some of the Dash services like VNet, and then do more stringent packet tests. This is just echoing UDP packets and making sure they come back. So 1,000 packets is just arbitrary. So sending 500 packets into each port. They come back, we count them, say, yeah, they went through. We'll start doing tests where we look at the packet contents and make sure that the proper pipeline transformations were done. And in the later pipelines, let's see. Okay, this is the one that I'm working on. This is in my fork. It's not a pull request yet. Not only after I run the XCSC traffic generators, I actually spin up the SAI Thrift Server and verify that it runs. And in another hour or two, I'll have another test here that actually does client connections to the SAI Thrift Server and does some table accesses. So I actually have all the moving parts will be verified and working. And then it's just a matter of fleshing out with real tests.
Wow.
Does that explain it? that help?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you so much, Chris. I think, that actually explains that we are going to be moving from whatever the test harness we have today into the SAI Thrift Server, even in our pipeline.
Yes.
And also we run those tests. And, today you are showing the XCRC. Is this basically going to be replaced with Snappy?
Snappy is a client library that makes XCSC traffic generator easy to use. So Snappy is like the client lib, and it's very Pythonic. There's a Go version too. If Go is your jam, you could write tests in Go. I'll be using Python, but we have certain people that love to use Go, and they do it that way. So the software traffic generator that we're using is called XCC, and the free version, which is available in Docker Hub. It has some performance caps built in because, of course, we'd like to sell licensed versions, but the free version is totally appropriate for these kind of tests. And Snappy would be the client library that programs it, and there's already an example of that. I did review this once briefly, but if we look at the code under test cases, BMV2 model. So this is not even a PyTest, it's just straight Python. It imports the Snappy library, and it's on PyPy, so you just do a pip install. But that's even done automatically in this build workflow. You don't have to do anything manually except clone the module, clone this repo. So it's just the script does the following: send 1,000 packets from one port to another at a rate of 1,000. So it's just, here's the Python. You can create flows. I won't walk through all the details, and we have actually sites under Open Traffic Generator repo and GitHub. There's links to all those sites in this README, in our README here in Dash, so you can follow up and learn about it. And there's even a Slack support channel, so you can just reach out to us directly.
No, sounds good. That explains it. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Right. Yeah, you bet.
Chris, sorry. Yeah, you were going through my pull request to the build pipeline. Right? So I had a question there. So I noticed that there were two containers that were getting pulled.
Yeah.
One was the P4C and the other one was the BMV2.
Yeah, I can go to the pipeline, and that's the current. Whoops. I wanted to go back to actions. Now remember, this is what's in main right now. Once my pull request is merged in, it'll look different. It'll be more containers, more smaller ones. So yeah, first it pulls P4C, and this is being pulled right from Docker Hub, the P4Lang Docker Hub repo or registry, and so that pulls P4C, and then we compile the code and generate the JSON files for the BMV2. Then it clones or installs the SAI submodule, and then it pulls this large BMV2 image. This is the other Docker, and it's 2 minutes. Right?
So my question was about, so my question is about this Docker here.
Yes.
So do we have to build this on our own for our development?
No, you don't. It's pulled from Docker Hub, so you don't have to.
So one issue I was facing with this one is that so this container here has some users and groups that are built into it while it was built.
Yes.
Right. So how do we share files or share volumes with this one, because the user permissions are getting messed up with that.
Right. So I did mention that, and I'll expand on it a bit. I'm sorry you ran into that. Bud just reported it to me yesterday as well, and he had a simple workaround, and I'll share that. I mean, I can probably copy it down. He ran into the same thing. I haven't spent time fixing that, but I will. And I mentioned it earlier. That's one of the things that was discovered when other people started using this.
Yeah, sorry,
I will, what I'll do,
Probably I wasn't there when you talked about it.
yeah, you can rebuild it locally if you want. Takes a little while, but
Yeah,
once
that's how I already had a pre-built one, so I was able to use your command line option to override with my container, and I was able to proceed. So
right. And
just wondering how to do it.
yeah, when that happens, what I would say is let me know. And then I can, because I didn't realize that problem was built in there. Other people who tested it, they may have built it themselves. So they didn't pull it from Docker Hub. So it was like an undetected bug.
So how does it work on the GitHub runner itself?
GitHub runner, everything's running as root. And so it just avoids the problem. But I shouldn't have to do that. So this may actually be the root cause for a reason why I had to go to root, because of having problems. I didn't realize that was the problem. So what I want to do is I'll figure out a way to solve that problem in a graceful way, so that when people use it locally, I'll probably create a runner like dash user or something and put in the right ownership changes in the make file, so you never see this problem. I just have to play around with it a bit.
Sure.
I'm sorry, ran into that problem. So this is what I just typed in the chat window, the command that Bud said fix the problem for him. This chmod. So you just add read write permissions to group other in these directories, SAI, tests, and BMB2. I haven't had a chance to try this out. So, hopefully in the near future, I'll solve all these problems. It's like this, the kind of thing you find out when someone else uses your code that was so perfect in your own workstation. And then find out, assumptions. So yeah, so that's what happens. And just to reiterate, if I can find the right, let's see. So it's going to look different. The next pull request will have more Docker images. So P4C. Now I'm not using P4Lang. I'm using an even smaller one. I took the P4Lang one and stripped stuff out, so it's even smaller. And then the SAI Thrift image takes only 32 seconds to pull. And then this BNB2 builder image, it's probably not much because I think it shares a lot of content with this one. So, when Docker's a layered file, it uses a layered file system called overlay file system, where all these layers are stacked, almost like, transparencies, where the total file system is a combination of layers. And so if you've already got underlying layers that are common, you don't have to pull them again. Docker is very smart. It just pulls what it needs. So it can be pretty fast if you construct them properly. And one of the things is you have a lot of smaller images. The runtime footprint is smaller and the disk footprint smaller. And if you're sharing layers between a lot of them, the deltas is very small. So the actual footprint on your disk can be much smaller than you think. And then let's see, there's another, I don't have another one, but there'll be some other images, like there'll be a SAI Thrift Server and a SAI Thrift client. Speaking of Docker images, Christina and I are working with some of the Microsoft IT people to set up an Azure hosted container registry, ACR, Azure Container Registry. And so we'll move all the images from Chris Summers on Docker Hub to an Azure instance. And we just got the URLs for that this morning. So sometime in the near future, I'll try to migrate to that. Yeah. I'll try to fix the username so that it's not Chris in the images, even though I love people to remember who wrote them. And then we'll also be hopefully migrating the runners to dedicated Azure runners, so they'll be more performant. And sometime down the road, this could be many months, we'll start utilizing some of the same build methodologies as Sonic does, where you have dashboards and artifact repositories with all the artifacts stored and logs and everything. It'll be industrial strength.
would be awesome.
Any other questions?
I think we need to save a little bit of time for Mircea for
Yeah,
his
yeah,
pull
I'm-
request.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I'll
Mirc-
stop sharing.
Right, right. So, yeah, and then 5 minutes for me at the end. And Mircea, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm sharing my
Okay.
screen right now. Let me know when you can see it.
I
Yep.
can see.
Actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I keep been working on some fixes, and like you said, I had different people trying, so I got some feedback, so I keep fixing. But one of them was because I always get the question, what are the IPs? What is a config? I did this -1 VPC1 IP JSON, and I used a sample that was there, and I placed the value in here, plus did few changes, plus removed a lot of things which were not yet, let's say, available, like HA groups and so on, which are part of the sample. But in our test, we are not doing anything with HA at this time. So I just removed that section. So we have all the VPC numbers, the IP addresses, and everything based on the schema. Now, the IDs here are a bit, how to say, like not necessarily human readable, like a big UID. I try to make it human readable to be easier to follow everything, or put names, let's say. Yeah, this is for one IP. And now the intent, and we are almost ready for any test that is scaled from now. It will not be a dump of a JSON file. It will actually be a Python script that you'll have to take run, and that will generate a JSON file, because it gets to quite a significant size, sometimes 600 meg, 1 gig and something, when you scale it all the way high. But for the first sample, I just use the JSON format. The only comment I have here is that to what Chris said, Chris, you said you want like a config that can be loaded and so on. But when this is presented, there is a note there who says this is just a example, but this is not what it will be in production. So it's a bit of a note there that this is not the final format. And that's, I don't know. I think we need, I don't know if Sunny is here or somebody that can make that decision and actually finalize the format and everything.
He is here.
Yeah, Prince is here.
Hey,
Hi,
Prince.
Prince.
so yeah, I'll take a look at this. So this is the ACLs one. I think in the HLD we have one example of the JSON format.
I know, but it says that in production, or the JSON format will not be used. This is just for people to understand the structure, and actually there will be something else which will be used. I don't remember right now, but
It'll be using Yang. Yang will be
Yang.
the official schema.
Yang model, exactly. Yeah, Yang.
Okay. So this is mainly like a reference here then.
Yeah, so then if Chris is talking about having something that can actually be used to get configuration, can we have that final thing that will actually be used in production if it's not the JSON format? So we can, I don't know, use whatever is going to be used. Anyway, yeah, so this is what I had for this.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow that thought. So we're asking for something that'll be used in our production environment of the Sonic team?
In the Dash
Mm,
production
okay.
environment, yeah.
Well, so my interpretation of this conversation is there's been an ongoing kind of mismatch in let's say what the importance or use of this JSON is. We need some kind of an intermediate format so we can test the middleware. And it's been stated since day one, SAI is going to be the integration point for all the implementations, and Sonic just sits on top of it. But the SAI has to be standardized. So we need a standard way to represent test cases and that don't depend on or assume a northbound interface or an SDN controller. We really want to keep these things, kind of decoupled, because otherwise, if you only have one schema at the very top of the northbound, then you need the whole stack to be able to do your testing. Otherwise, everything's just ad hoc all the time. So we really need a canonical intermediate format. And as I've talked about in the past, we intend to create a platform that will take that intermediate format of configuration and automatically generate SAI API tests through SAI Thrift, SAI Redis tests that go through the Redis DB, and then hopefully GNMI tests, because all the configurations, they're pretty similar because there's not a lot of deep transformations. So we really need that intermediate format as like a single source of truth. I believe the Sonic, infrastructure team feels that, well, we're not going to store persistently dash configurations, so we don't need a JSON format for import and export. But even if that's true, and I would say maybe we do want one just so we can get for testing. We need a test definition language, and so let's just make it this JSON format and agree on it. And before you joined the meeting, Prince, I was saying, because I've been asking this for a while, it feels like boiling the ocean because it's a large schema, and to try to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and make it perfect, it's a big ask. Can we do it incrementally where we take some of these first test cases and agree on let's say an interim, this is our standard. We'll try it out for a while and see if it fits. If it works well, we'll say, okay, that part is our canonical schema. Now let's have some new test cases or services that need additional schema definitions. Then we'll add those to it and try that out. Now we can kind of do it incrementally and not try to do it all at once. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Hey, Chris, a quick question on what you're basically talking about. Could this canonical format or the schema that you're talking about, could that be a dash app DB, which eventually just drives the SAI API?
I mean, it could be. I don't think we care exactly what the schema is precisely. It just needs to represent the config, and if it's app DB level, I think the thing is, it has to not require a big transformation between app DB and SAI. I mean, otherwise you're rewriting a lot of orchestration code in the test platform, right?
Exactly.
The assumption is it's not even really much of a transformation. It's almost just like a translation, right? Like if it's IP address.
Right. So I mean, if we look at the flow of information that comes from, say, northbound using a GNMI, as you mentioned, that particular stuff is stored in the Yang data model, right? So eventually that gets translated into or stored in dash app DB, and from there it is driven into conversion to SAI. So if we have to define the dash app DB schema anyways, why don't we do just one thing as opposed to multiple different representations, which essentially perhaps means less work for us, and it serves multiple purposes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never tried to take a stand on how that schema should map to AppDB or whatever, as long as it's something that's easy to convert into the different interfaces. And it's been an assumption, and no one's really contested it, that it's not much of a transformation, unlike certain, there are some Sonic configs where there's a big transformation and you don't want to have to write orchestration type code in your test platform, right? You want to just have a simple, it's almost like translating between, Latin, Spanish, and French. They're all really close.
They're all Romance languages.
Right. And, or Roman numerals and decimal digits, right? It's just a slight change. It's not a big spread.
Right. So I see that Prince has made an attempt to explain this thing or give an example of something like this in the Sonic Dash HLD.
Yes.
So
we were to look at there is a example of how things are going to be stored in the dash. So there is this very simple small example of dash app DB, and we can see there how the schema is defined as it flows from the northbound into the app DB and eventually to the SAI. So that might serve as an example for us to see whether or not it is something that we can reuse for testing purposes.
Yeah, and now Murcha was just showing an example over. He took the let's say the JSON example that's not trying to be definitive. It's just an example, just to get a discussion going. And he just took it and kind of polished it up a bit, and changed a few things, and said, "Let's try this." So I don't know how that relates to what you just proposed, Hannah, but we do need to start somewhere and start saying, this is it. And if it becomes, the de facto standard by the fact that we start using it, that's fine by me. We just need to do something. And the reason I keep pushing this and I'm upping it a bit now is we're about to make a significant investment in framework that starts consuming and or generating this data and translate it into APIs. And we don't want to have to backtrack. So we just need some kind of stake in the ground that says this is it, or 90% of how it'll be, whatever.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
In the next few months, we're going to produce a framework that can take test cases and drive a lot of different interfaces. So, we want to do that once.
Okay, so who do we need approval? Are we looking for approval then, or are we looking for guidance, or?
Well, I guess I would ask Prince, do you have any response to all of this? And is this making sense what we're trying to do and why?
Yeah, I think the PR is a little bit outdated. So we have some name changes, as well as the schemas also is changed as per the latest HLD. So I think this PR needs to be revisited.
Okay. And again, just to be pragmatic, let's try to do a piece at a time. Like let's try to work really hard on the part that we're going to need first. For example, these first test cases, Marian's going to help define and Intel's going to help define. And we also look at what Murcha was just sharing in that PR. Murcha, do you want to make a pitch to get this PR accepted soon? And I think we have Gohan here. He was concerned about where this test repo would live, but I think,
Yeah, that's one pending item where it lives. And the other one is I was still finalizing some work on the CPS test for this. There are a few things which I still need to make small changes. And once those are done, yeah, we should accept it. I'm trying to make them today. I was trying last week, but let's see.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and once this is accepted, I'll make the one for 48,000 IPs, and then we're gonna move to 4.89.6 million one.
That'll be a big JSON file.
It will be a Python script which will generate the JSON file on your machine. I'm not gonna commit that in Git.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
It will be a generator.
Yeah.
Great. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just to wrap it up then, these are just my tracking work items from our conversations, and these, top 4 are done. And it looks like, Prince mentioned today, he did a review of PR, was it 137 or 127, Chris? And he just was going to look at it a little more today.
Right.
So I talked to him about that, right? And so here, we're covering this SAI Thrift Server integration. We're talking about this schema here, and we've got overlay test cases here. Dash container may be ready at the end of August is what we were thinking. Of course, we always need volunteers to write test cases. We have the counters, metering, and telemetry, and we're looking to provide some updates on that, of what counters we think we'll need soon. And then we have the memory footprint after we get through, our initial swing at this and see what kind of data we can provide back. So these are the work items I have. If y'all want me to add any more, let me know.
Christina, for the SAI Thrift Server work itself, for the auto generation framework for Dash and the test cases, that might become a separate item too. Yeah, here, yeah.
Should we do a separate item for that proposed demo when we were ready?
Sure, that's fine too. And for the overlay tests, please add Intel as well.
I'll do that. Thank you. Okay, great. And this demo,
Christina?
we were maybe going to be like a month out, or I'm trying to remember the time frame.
Likely before 1 month from now, but we can keep it that way.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, did someone say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this is Mukesh from AMD. So I just wanted to bring up that I have created a PR for the recent PR that you saw there, like what Chris was showing. So that's to address some gaps that we have in the routing, the P4 behavior model routing tables that we have today, compared to what we have in the GNMI model. So whenever we're ready, we can like discuss that either this week or yeah.
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick look. Support for phase 1. So, okay, so you asked for a review from Marianne and Prince. Okay.
Yeah.
So Marianne and Prince, do you want to maybe take a look at this the next 6 or 7 days and come back next week?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So I hope you guys are okay with this format I'm using. It's helping me more to keep track. So we're 6 minutes away from ending. So anything else for the rest of this meeting?
Well, I think that Gohan was mentioning that he suggested to leave the test in the Sonic management repo. Is there someone saying we should put them somewhere else? Because people are asking. So do we need to resolve this still?
Well, my view on this is right now where they live is fine. And I know that long term we might want to put them in the Sonic management repo. But isn't there also a governance issue with Linux Foundation changes, et cetera, that was raised?
Yeah, that would be my question as well. But I think Gohan dropped.
It did drop. And so before the migration to Linux Foundation, I remember we were keeping it small, keeping it fast, and keeping it where it is until we could at some point, integrate. Then the Linux Foundation move happened, and so we agreed to just keep it here because that content, Dash content, didn't move to Linux Foundation. That was my understanding. Prince, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think for temporary, okay, but I think for running the test, of course, we have to have that in the Sonic Manager because that's where the infra will be defined and anyone can use that as the topo or the topology to run the test, right? So if
will that be a conflict with the movement of Sonic to Linux, but Sonic Dash doesn't?
Yeah, so I'm not. That's what I wish Gohan was also here. But for now, I think we can probably have it. Yeah, in this current repo and see how it.
Thank you so much.
But my point is like when we start running the test is when if it is not part of Sonic Management, it will be like a little bit tricky to define the topo and run it in the lab.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And also another distinction is right now, so far we're just focused on testing the data plane of a single device. And there's no reason it has to be part of Sonic management repo because we're not really testing it like a Sonic device at this point. Right? It's really
no, but Chris, the point is like we have some here and some there, which will be like disconnected test, right? So if you have one place where we have the topology defined, and then you can use that for different purposes, like right? So otherwise it will like this section will be like may be used by very few people, and then the remaining folks will be using another infrastructure and the test from another repo. I think that will, yeah, don't think that will be aligned. Yeah.
Right. So we are at time about, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think that we'll take it offline, Prince. We need to actually brainstorm on where this is going to exist and what is the disadvantage of being under the Linux Foundation. I mean, I don't know. It has a different governance, so does that mean anything to us? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Yeah, that's true, Gerald. So
we should take it
action to
offline
run
and
it
try to
down.
figure out whether it matters at all. I mean, if it doesn't matter and
Yeah.
you can proceed, independently under that, then it's probably fine. I don't know what happens when you go there. Does something change where somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'm now leading this," or like what happens? I don't think that would happen, but we should probably take it offline and figure out what it really means.
And I'll lead that up, Gerald. I've talked to a couple Sonic leadership before, and I'll take that up.
Yeah.
I think we have one more hand in the air before we have to go.
Yeah,
Vijay?
hey, this is Vijay from AMD Consendo. So just wanted to bring up one more thing. We were identified a few gaps or enhancements in the behavioral model and want to introduce like a tunnel table for indirection. That's another PR which is in the works. So it is related to not directly to any phase 1 feature, but it is useful for phase 1 features. So that is another PR we are thinking of going ahead and raising. Is that okay?
Marian, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Is
What
that
about the
update to the HLD, Vijay?
No, this is going to be a behavioral model change. Yeah, it's basically like introducing a tunnel table for indirection, something that we noticed in the behavioral model, which will be useful for now and the future features.
So this channel is not to be created by the northbound then. It's
So yeah, I think we have to discuss the mechanics of that. So we just wanted to know whether we can go ahead and introduce it so we can discuss around the PR.
We have behavioral model meeting tomorrow, Vijay. You have the invite to that, right?
Yeah.
We could probably talk about it in depth in that meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, it's 10. I unfortunately have another call, but
so do I.
yeah, but I want to thank everybody today. Lots of great discussion. I'll send out notes and, put the recording on the YouTube channel. So if anyone missed it, they can listen. So thank you very much. And thanks for coming. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate you. Bye.